I'm Natalie Harper, 25 years old, and I'm staring at a banking screen that won't budge from a number I never expected to see zero. The account that was supposed to carry my last year of tuition looks like an empty plate after someone else's dinner. I refresh twice, then a third time the way you jiggle a stubborn doorknob and pray it clicks, but the page stays cold and flat. The balance that once felt like a promise, a safety net stitched by grandparents who believed in education, has vanished without a trace. My apartment is quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the thud in my chest that won't keep a steady rhythm. The sun over Boston throws slanted lines across my desk, and for a second, those lines look like a cage. I set both hands on the table to steady the tremor in my fingers and breathe until the room stops tilting. Somewhere between the fourth breath and the fifth, my shock hardens into something steadier, something I can stand on. I reach for my phone and tap the familiar Ohio number I've known since before I knew my multiplication tables. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments and tap like and subscribe if you've ever had to hold your ground when someone you loved told you to let it go. I grew up in a modest two-story on a quiet Columbus street where kids biked in crooked circles and neighbors waved across trimmed hedges, the kind of place where you learn early that you return borrowed tools, you show up to school plays even when the folding chairs pinch, and you tell the truth even when it stings. My mother Diane held those values like they were family heirlooms, working mornings at the grocery and nights at a diner so the mortgage stayed paid and my varsity art classes got the good paper, not the cheap kind that wrinkles. My father Raymond was the one who liked to speak for us in public. Church potlucks, PTA meetings, community barbecues, steady handshake, quick smile, careful talk about budgeting and responsibility that made other parents nod along. We were not the wealthiest family on the block, not by a long shot, but we were neat and punctual, and we kept things running even when the tires were thin and the winter coat needed one more season than it deserved. When I left for architecture school in Boston, the contrast landed like a gust from an open train door. Glass towers, names etched in plaques. Classmates who weren't waiting tables after studio just to cover materials. Friends who talked about summer internships abroad. The way we used to talk about county fairs. I didn't resent any of it. I took notes on the way the city breathed and tried to see how I might fit inside it without losing the quiet parts of home. The college account was part of that quiet, the practical thread running through every big decision. My grandparents had opened a UTMA account when I was born, and when they passed, my father became the custodian, the person who explained interest rates at the kitchen table and told me the money would do its job when the time came. I trusted that system the way I trusted the front steps to hold when I shuffled down in socks. Tuition bills came on a schedule as predictable as the seasons. I kept a spreadsheet. I picked up shifts at the campus cafe. I took pride in watching the balance fall in a way that meant a future was being built, one payment at a time. This last year was supposed to be the bridge from study to salary capstone studio portfolio polished interviews lined up, me standing in a city that never seemed to sleep and asking it to take me seriously. The morning I checked the account, I had a mug of coffee, a clear to-do list, and a deadline circled in red for next month's tuition installment. It was a simple ritual log in Confirm Breathe. When the number rolled over to that impossible zero, my first instinct was to blame the website, not the people I grew up with. I visited the bank the account linked to and confirmed my sign-in. I checked for an outage. I looked for a maintenance notice in a corner banner. Nothing. My second instinct was to talk myself down, maybe a hold, maybe an internal transfer, but even my most generous explanations started to crack when I remembered who held the keys and how many times he'd said, "Trust me," with a smile that asked you to stop asking questions. I thought about the way Dad could take a room in hand with a joke, and a story how he liked applause without ever stepping on a stage, how he'd remind people to save, to plan to be the grown-ups in the room. By the time the coffee had gone cold, I knew what I had to do, and the knowledge landed with a weight that didn't scare me. It steadied me. I pictured my mother counting tips into envelopes the way she used to count my allowance into cups, and I pictured my father at the head of our dining table, his voice full of lessons he wanted other people to learn. The question wasn't whether I should ask. The question was whether he would answer in the way a father should. I hovered over his contact for a beat longer than I'd like to admit. then pressed the call button and lifted the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice, and when his voice finally filled the line, light, warm, the kind of greeting that always sounds like sunshine, I said his name and used my own and felt the balance of my life shift as I asked him to explain. The call connects after the second ring, his voice warm and easy, the same one that used to echo through our house when he called everyone to dinner. "Hey, kiddo. Hey. How's my college girl doing?" For a heartbeat, I almost forget why I called. Then I glance back at the laptop screen at the zero still glowing where $53,000 used to be, and the words find their way out. "Dad, I'm looking at my college account. It's empty." The pause that follows is too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. "Oh," that he says, at last, the tone casual, almost amused. I had to move a few things around, just a temporary loan for a great stock opportunity. Perfect timing, really. I'll put it back once the returns hit. My throat tightens. "You borrowed it?" Without telling me, he sighs like a man explaining arithmetic to a child. "Sweetheart, you worry too much. You're smart. You'll figure out something. Take a semester off, get a job, enjoy life a little. You'll be fine." For a moment, the room feels like it's tilted off its axis. "Dad, that money was for school. Grandma and Grandpa set it up so I could finish my degree. You can't just take it." The silence on the line shifts into something harder. "Family helps family," he says finally. "You'll understand someday." Then his voice sharpens as if he's tired of humoring me. "It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet instead of expecting handouts." The word handout stings worse than I expect. I grip the edge of the desk and try to keep my voice steady. That was my money. Legally mine. He laughs once short and hollow. "Look, I've got a meeting. We'll talk later." The call ends before I can reply. The phone screen goes dark in my hand, but the sound of his voice stays filling every quiet space in the room. I call again once, twice, until he picks up on the 4th ring. "What now, Natalie?" His patience is gone. "You need to put that money back," I say. "Today." There's a rustle, maybe his hand brushing against a table, and then he says calm and sharp all at once, "Family matters more than money." Maybe this is God's way of telling you that architecture isn't your path. With your looks, you could be modeling. Use what you have. The breath catches in my chest. For a second, I can't find words. 4 years of drafting, designing sleepless nights over blueprints boiled down to what I look like. "I'm not quitting school," I tell him quietly, "and I'm not using my looks instead of my mind." His reply is final. "Call me when you've grown up." Then the line goes dead again. The air in the apartment feels heavy. I set the phone down and open the banking portal, scrolling through every transaction. The withdrawals start small, 2,000 here, 3,000 there, each one spaced just far enough apart to escape attention. Over 8 weeks, every dollar is gone. The pattern is too deliberate to be a mistake. I keep scrolling until I reach the last entry, March 28th, the day the account hit zero. For the next hour, I read everything I can about custodial accounts. Every article says the same thing: when I turned 21, control should have transferred to me. My father shouldn't have had access at all. I remember his explanation years ago about needing his name on the account for tax reasons. Back then I believed him. Now it sounds like the start of a lie that took 3 years to finish. I close the laptop and sit perfectly still, letting the reality settle. The man who taught me about integrity, who warned me never to sign a paper I didn't read, has been stealing from me in quiet, measured steps. I should feel panic, but what I feel instead is something cleaner, a clarity that leaves no room for confusion. He's crossed a line that can't be smoothed over with a family dinner or an apology. That night, I pack a small suitcase and book the next bus home. 15 hours from Boston to Columbus. I tell no one the reason, not even my friends. The following afternoon, I step off at the downtown terminal into the thick Ohio humidity. No one is there to meet me. I walk the 12 blocks to our street, passing familiar porches and the same row of maples that shed too early every fall. The house looks smaller than I remember, paint fading on the shutters, the porch light left on in broad daylight. Mom's text arrives as I reach the gate. "Dinner at 7. Your favorite lasagna." My throat tightens as I read it. Through the window, I see her moving between the kitchen and dining room, her apron dusted with flower hair, pulled back in the same tired bun she's worn for years. She opens the door before I can knock and folds me into a hug that smells like tomato sauce and lavender lotion. "There's my girl," she says softly. "Your father's in the dining room." Dad greets me with that familiar charm, arms out, smile bright. "Boston's done you good, Natalie. You look like a real city professional." I sit where he gestures, watching the careful ease in his movements. The dinner table is set for 3 candles lit silver polished. It's the kind of presentation he's always loved to stage disguised as family time. Mom keeps the conversation light, finals my internship interview, the weather in Boston, while Dad sprinkles the evening with financial advice I didn't ask for. "Inflation's no joke these days," he says, cutting his lasagna into even squares. "Smart people know when to move their money. You can't just let it sit." My fork stills halfway to my mouth. I look at him across the table, at the face that's delivered this same sermon to neighbors and friends for years. "Is that right?" I manage. He smiles completely at ease. "Absolutely. Timing is everything in life." Mom mistakes my silence for fatigue. After dinner, she gathers the dishes, insisting she'll rest before her next shift. When she disappears upstairs, I wait until the house settles before moving toward Dad's office. The door isn't locked. It never has been. The air inside smells like his aftershave and coffee. On the desk, a newspaper lies folded beside a mug that reads, "World's Best Dad." I start with the top drawer pen's sticky notes, nothing useful. The file cabinet yields neat folders of tax returns, insurance policies, and warranties. I'm about to give up when I notice his navy blazer hanging behind the door. In one pocket, I find car keys and a roll of mints. In the other, crumpled slips of paper. I smooth them out under the desk lamp. Casino receipts, 500, 1,000, 2,500, each one stamped with the same logo, Riverbend Casino. The floor seems to shift beneath me. I move to his computer and try passwords. His birthday fails, so does Mom's. On the 3rd try, their anniversary, the screen opens. The inbox holds months of promotional emails from the same casino. VIP invitations, loyalty bonuses. A Diamond Club membership card sits tucked inside his wallet, gold letters flashing beneath the lamplight. Footsteps creak on the stairs. I shove the papers back pocket the receipts I've already printed and close the browser just as Mom appears in the doorway with a mug of tea. "Thought you could use this," she says gently. Her hands look raw from long shifts, the skin around her knuckles split from detergent. I take the cup and force a smile. "Thanks, Mom. Just checking email." She nods, too tired to question me. The front door opens downstairs, followed by Dad's familiar voice calling out for leftovers. I keep my eyes on the monitor as he steps into the room. "Studying in here," he asks, glancing around with mock amusement. "Better light than the living room, isn't it?" "Just catching up on schoolwork," I say, keeping my tone even. His gaze drifts across the desk, lingers a moment too long on the printer. "Find everything you need?" he asks. I meet his eyes. "Yes, exactly what I was looking for." He studies me for a beat, the practiced warmth fading to something unreadable. Then he smiles again, smooth as ever. "Good to hear." To Mom he adds, "You leaving soon? I can warm up the car." She nods, and within minutes the two of them are gone, the sound of the engine fading into the night. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and pull my phone from my pocket. "Need to talk. Legal question. Call tomorrow at 2. I send the text to Aunt Carla and stare at the ceiling, the receipt still burning in my pocket. My father didn't invest the money. He gambled it away. The truth is right there in black and white, and now there's no one seeing it. I turn off the light and listen to the house breathe, the walls settling the way they always have. Down the hall, the framed family photos catch faint moonlight smiling faces that don't match the story underneath. Tomorrow, I'll have answers, and the next part of this fight will begin. I barely sleep that night. Every sound in the house seems louder, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock, even the faint groan of the wooden stairs as the house settles. My father's words replay in loops, and each time they feel colder, more deliberate. By dawn, I've organized every piece of evidence I found, the casino receipts, the printed bank statements, The promotional emails. The pages form a thin but undeniable record of betrayal. When the morning light finally slips through the blinds, I hear the creak of my mother's footsteps in the hallway. She moves quietly, not wanting to wake anyone before her early shift. I tuck the papers into my backpack and sit on the edge of the bed, listening to her soft hum as she pours coffee. It's a tune she's carried since I was little, one she used to hum when bills piled up, and my father promised everything was handled. I know she still believes him. By noon, I'm at the small downtown office where Aunt Carla works. The sign on the glass door reads Benson Legal Services, plain and practical, much like her. When she sees me standing there, she puts down her pen and gestures toward the chair across from her desk. "What's going on, Nat?" she asks. "Your text sounded serious." I slide the stack of papers toward her and watch her expression shift as she scans each page. He took everything I say quietly. All of it. Carla's brow furrows. She flips through the receipts, the casino statements, the printed emails, her lawyer's instincts kicking in immediately. "You did the right thing bringing this to me," she says. "This isn't just bad judgment, it's theft. And under custodial law, it's illegal." She begins typing notes, each keystroke sharp and deliberate. "This isn't just about the money, Nat. It's about trust and breach of fiduciary duty." I sit back unsure what any of that really means beyond the truth I already know he stole from me. "What happens now?" I ask. Carla leans back in her chair, studying me. "First, we document everything. Every withdrawal, every text, every conversation. Then we send him a certified letter demanding full repayment. If he ignores it, we go to court." The calm authority in her voice steadies me. I've spent years watching my father talk his way out of things, always with that same confident smile. But Carla isn't swayed by charm. "I'll take care of the paperwork," she says. "You just focus on staying grounded. You have finals soon, right?" I nod. She reaches across the desk and gives my hand a brief squeeze. "We'll handle this." That evening, her kitchen transforms into our meeting place. The same oak table where I once ate holiday dinners now holds piles of folders and notebooks. My mother sits across from me, her waitress uniform replaced by a simple blouse. Her face looks drawn, as if sleep has been scarce for years. Carla lays out the documents in careful order. "I want you both to see what we're dealing with," she says. Mom's eyes widen as she studies the bank statements. "He told me the college account was safe," she whispers. "Said it was earning interest." Carla points to the withdrawal dates. "These aren't investments, Diane. They're cash transactions. And look, casino charges." She slides a receipt across the table. Mom stares at it for a long time before covering her mouth with her hand. He promised he'd stopped. I've never seen her look like this, part disbelief, part recognition. Slowly, she reaches under the table and pulls out a shoebox. "I found this in the attic," she says, sliding it forward. Inside are faded bank statements, most dated before I was born. It's the same pattern, Carla murmurs, flipping through the papers. "He's been gambling for decades." Mom's hands rest flat on the table now, her voice low and steady. "I worked 2 jobs for 20 years because I thought we were building something together. Turns out I was just patching holes he kept making." Carla meets her eyes. Being family doesn't erase accountability. Mom nods slowly, her face tightening as years of exhaustion seem to settle into something firmer. "No, it doesn't." 2 days later, the demand letter goes out, certified mail, signed by Carla. I can almost imagine the sound of it landing on his desk at work, cutting through the image he's built of himself as the reliable office manager and model citizen. By that afternoon, he's already called 3 times each voicemail, angrier than the last. "Natalie, this is ridiculous," he says in the first one, his voice strained. "You're overreacting. Call me back so we can talk like adults." The second comes hours later, more insistent. "You're letting your aunt poison you against me. Everything I've ever done has been for this family. Don't throw that away." By midnight, the tone has shifted completely. "You think you can threaten me? I raised you. I supported your little art projects when I could have pushed you towards something practical. This is how you repay me. I delete each message, but not before saving copies to my files. Carla will want them as evidence." The next morning, my cousin Lila calls from her office. "Your dad just phoned me," she says bluntly. "He says you're trying to ruin him." I grip the phone tighter. "What did you tell him? That he needs to pay you back?" What he took, she says. Then he started ranting about you being ungrateful, about how you've always been difficult. Her voice hardens. I recorded it. You should have a copy. By the end of the week, the recordings, letters, and bank statements form a thick folder in Carla's office. She's methodical, building the case piece by piece. Meanwhile, Mom has begun making quiet changes of her own. She stops wearing her wedding ring. The pale line it leaves behind looks almost like a scar. That night, she calls me from her shift at the diner. I broke down at work, she says softly. Right in front of everyone. My stomach twists. Mom. Don't be sorry, she interrupts gently. They were kind. They told me they'd seen the signs for years. The way he'd come in talking too loud, borrowing cash, bragging about his winnings. I hear a faint sound through the line, metal against metal. What was that, I ask. My ring, she says. It slid right off like it was never meant to stay. Her words echo long after the call ends. By morning, the locks on the house are changed. Carla handled the paperwork to close their joint accounts and freeze access to remaining funds. It's time to protect what's left, she told us. Dad finds out the next evening when he tries to use his card at the gas station, and it's declined. The calls start again, but this time we don't answer. Mom keeps working her shifts, walking to the diner with her head high, even as rumors start to circulate. Neighbors ask questions. She gives polite answers. One of them, Mrs. Holt from next door, stops by with a bag of groceries and a knowing look. He's been at that casino every Friday for months, she says quietly. People talk. For the first time, I see how fragile his reputation really is. The man who lectured about fiscal discipline and family honor now whispers lies to anyone who will still listen. But the circle is closing in, and fewer people are willing to take his side. That night, Carla sits with me on the porch as the streetlights flicker on. You'll need to head back to Boston soon, she says, her voice gentle but firm. I'll manage things here. Your finals can't wait, and you've done what you needed to. I glance toward the darkened house where my mother finally sleeps without fear of his return. I can't afford to finish school without that money, I say quietly. You will, Carla replies. One way or another, you'll get it back. Every cent. She places a hand over mine, the same steady confidence she's had since I was a kid who scraped her knees on her driveway. The next step is court, she says. And this time he won't be able to talk his way out. The street is still except for the hum of crickets and the occasional car passing by. For the first time in weeks, I feel something close to peace, thin and fragile, but real. Tomorrow, I'll board the bus back to Boston. My future still feels uncertain, but the silence of this Ohio night carries a promise. The truth is finally on our side. The morning after I return to Boston, I sit in my small apartment with the blinds drawn and the evidence folder open on the table. My laptop pings every few minutes with updates from Aunt Carla, copies of filed forms, timestamps from the certified letter, and a scanned version of the acknowledgement of receipt my father signed. She writes like a woman who's done this before, concise, unemotional, and steady. He can't ignore this now, she messages. The timeline is official. I stare at the screen until the words blur together, trying to believe they carry the weight I need them to. My classes pick up again, but my focus slips in pieces. Between final projects and portfolio deadlines, I replay every conversation from the past few months, every time Dad talked about discipline, every time Mom apologized for his temper. The ordinary rhythm of campus life feels almost foreign. My friends notice the difference, but I give short answers blaming exhaustion. Grace drops by one evening with takeout and sits quietly beside me while I outline my capstone design. You've been somewhere else lately, she says softly. I nod, but keep drawing. There's nothing I can explain that would make sense to someone outside the mess. Late that Friday, Carla calls. I sent the demand notice to his employer, she says. He's been there 15 years, so it'll get attention. Her tone is firm, but I can hear the undercurrent of fatigue. He'll call you, she warns. Don't respond directly. Everything goes through me from here on. She pauses before adding, How's your mother holding up? Working double shifts, I tell her, but she sounds different, more certain. Carla hums in quiet agreement. Good. She's meeting with Linda Evans next week. The name rings a faint bell. Divorce attorney, I ask. The best in Columbus, Carla confirms. Your mom brought 20 years of records, tax forms, loan papers, pay stubs. Linda said it's one of the most detailed files she's seen. For the first time in weeks, a sense of forward motion steadies me. That evening, I call Mom before her shift. The background noise of clattering dishes and laughter drifts through the line. Carla told me about the lawyer, I say. How'd it go? She exhales slowly. Strange, she admits, but freeing. I've been saving those papers in a shoebox for years, never really knowing why. There's a pause, then a faint smile in her voice. Turns out I was keeping receipts in more ways than one. Days stretch into a pattern of work study and phone updates from Carla. Each message builds a clearer picture of what's ahead: formal filings, subpoenas, hearings. The process is slow but methodical. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, my phone buzzes with a voicemail notification. My father's voice fills the speaker, strained and unfamiliar. "Natalie, this has gone too far," he says. "You're embarrassing the family. You think lawyers fix everything? Call me." I forward it to Carla without listening twice. An hour later, another message arrives, angrier. "You don't turn on your own blood," he snaps. "After everything I've done, this is how you treat me." That one I delete before it finishes. Each new message feels less like a threat and more like a sign of unraveling. Mom calls that night after closing the diner. "He came by the house," she says quietly. "I didn't open the door." I can picture her there, the porch light spilling across the steps, her apron still tied at the waist. "He said he wanted to talk," she adds, "but Mike from the kitchen walked me home. He stayed until your father left." There's a long silence before she says, "I think the neighbors heard." Let them. By the weekend, Carla's letter reaches its next stage, a formal demand for repayment filed with the county clerk. The language is cold and factual, outlining the breaches point by point. I read through it twice before saving a copy to my drive. The words don't just belong to a lawyer. They tell the story my father refused to hear when I begged him for honesty. That Sunday, I video call Mom. She's sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea steaming in her hands. Behind her, the dining room looks bare. The decorative china cabinet that once held his trophies and photographs is gone. "Sold it," she says simply. Didn't need reminders. I nod, studying the lighter expression on her face. "You sound more at peace," I tell her. She hesitates, then smiles faintly. "Peace might be too strong," she says, "but I'm learning what quiet feels like." Carla joins the call a few minutes later, her glasses perched low on her nose as she flips through files. "We're ready for the next step," she says. "Once the court reviews our claim, we'll request an injunction to freeze any remaining assets. He can't use what's left to gamble it away." She glances toward Mom. "Linda's paperwork for the divorce will go in the same week. Timing matters here." The following days pass in a blur of preparation. Carla coordinates signatures, Mom gathers employment records, I send in my own affidavit verifying the account's purpose. Each small act feels like a piece of something larger, a structure rising from ruins. Yet underneath the momentum is a quiet ache I can't quite name. On Thursday evening, while I'm sketching floor plans for my portfolio, my phone lights up again. The message preview reads, "From Raymond Harper." My stomach twists as I press play. "Natalie," his voice says, calm this time, almost pleading. "You need to stop this before it's too late. Think about your future. You'll ruin mine for nothing." I stare at the screen, the faint hum of the city outside my window, filling the silence that follows. I forward the voicemail to Carla, then close the laptop. The sky outside is streaked with the last of the day's light, and the reflection in the glass shows a woman who looks older than she did a month ago. Tired, yes, but clear-eyed. The next morning brings a different kind of news. Carla's email subject line reads, "Filing complete. Inside are attachments, the stamped court documents, the official case number, the acknowledgement from his employer. The process has begun." Beneath her signature, she's written one simple sentence, "We're on record now." That evening, Mom and I talk again, her voice lighter than I've heard in years. "I told Loretta at the diner what's going on," she says. "She brought cupcakes to my table and said she's proud of me. Imagine that." She laughs softly. "The people who used to pity me now look me in the eye." For a long moment, neither of us speaks. Through the phone, I can hear the clatter of plates, the buzz of customers, the small, ordinary sounds of her world moving forward. "You'll be back in Boston soon," she says finally. "Focus on finishing what you started." I nod, even though she can't see me. "I will." After we hang up, I open my sketchbook and start drawing again. The lines come easier this time, as if my hands remember something my heart had forgotten how to build something stable piece by piece, no matter how many times it's been broken. Outside, the night deepens over the city. My inbox fills with confirmation emails and court notifications, each one another step in a process that feels both heavy and inevitable. When I finally turn off the lamp, the faint blue light from the street filters across the room soft and steady. Tomorrow the legal fight will move from paper to courtroom. For now, I let the quiet stretch around me, knowing that somewhere in Ohio, my mother is finally sleeping through the night. The first real sign that my father had lost control came quietly. He called Carla's office early on a Monday morning, demanding to negotiate privately. She didn't answer, but she forwarded the voicemail to me later that day. His voice was clipped defensive. "This has gone far enough. I'll make partial payments when I can, but you people need to stop embarrassing me." That was how he described stealing my future embarrassing him. Carla called me later that evening. "He's trying to bait you," she said. "Don't engage. The court filing stands." I could hear her tapping a pen on her desk. "He'll escalate before he gives in. They always do." By midweek, her prediction proved right. My phone lit up with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some were cautious, some accusatory, all of them repeating versions of the same story my father must have fed them. "He says you misunderstood," one aunt texted. "You know how dramatic young people can be." Another wrote, "Your dad sounded heartbroken on the phone. Maybe you should just talk things out." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I forwarded each message to Carla, who replied simply, "Keep everything. We'll need the full picture." 2 days later, my cousin Lila called. "He's been on the phone all morning," she said without greeting. "Told everyone at Grandma's church that you and your mom are trying to ruin him." Her tone hardened. "I told him he's done that himself." I heard rustling on the other end, then the faint sound of a recording playing. It was my father's voice again, twisting the story, saying I'd agreed to the withdrawals, that I'd spent the money on luxuries, and blamed him when things got tight. Hearing him lie with such ease sent a chill through me. That night I called my mother. She'd just finished a long shift at the diner, and I could hear the fatigue in her voice. "He's telling people I'm unstable," she said quietly. "That you're being manipulated by Carla. Martha from next door told me he tried to convince her I was having a breakdown." She paused. She didn't believe him. She's seen his car at the casino too many times. Mom let out a short, humorless laugh. "The neighborhood's talking, but not the way he expected." I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, the same table where he used to boast about his smart investments. The image hurt, but it also brought a strange relief. His lies were losing ground. The next afternoon, Carla drove to Mom's house. She'd brought a stack of documents, bank statements, court filings, letters from the attorneys. I joined the meeting over video. "The divorce case is moving faster than we expected," Carla said, flipping through her binder. "Linda's already requested a temporary restraining order to prevent him from touching the remaining joint accounts." Mom looked down at her hands pale against the mug she held. "He's going to be furious," she murmured. "He already is?" Carla replied evenly. "But that's not your burden anymore." For a long time, no one spoke. The sound of the refrigerator filled the background until Carla cleared her throat. "I'll be filing a second notice this week for wage garnishment. If he refuses repayment, the court will deduct directly from his paycheck." Mom's eyes flickered up. "Can they really do that?" "Yes," Carla said. "And they will." He crossed a legal line. The confidence in her voice left no room for argument. Later that night, Mom called me again, her voice trembling with something I couldn't name. "I took off my ring for good today," she said. "I put it in an envelope and left it on the counter." "No note." She inhaled shakily. "It feels like stepping into daylight after years underground." By the next morning, Carla had already acted on the plan. She contacted my father's employer, submitted the garnishment request, and ensured all legal paperwork was airtight. Within days, his access to every joint account was frozen. When he realized the backlash was instant, he showed up at the house after midnight, pounding on the door. Mom called the police, her voice steady as she explained the situation. When the officers arrived, he was still in the driveway shouting about betrayal and family loyalty. One officer, Officer Grayson, according to the report, warned him to leave immediately. He did, but not before shouting that he'd make them regret this. Mom texted me the next morning with only 3 words. Locks are changed. It was the first time she'd taken action that left no room for reversal. From that point, my father's behavior shifted. The messages grew desperate, then erratic, alternating between apologies and accusations. He called Carla's office repeatedly, leaving voicemails that veered between threats and pleas for forgiveness. "You can't do this to me," one said. "I'm still her father." Carla archived each one, forwarding copies to both lawyers. "He's trying to build a case for sympathy," she told me, "but the paper trail won't lie." Meanwhile, Mom began rebuilding her routines. The house felt lighter when she described it. Windows open, new locks, a faint smell of fresh paint in the hallway. "I'm selling that big dining set," she said one night. "It was always his trophy piece anyway." She sounded almost cheerful. As for me, I focused on finishing my finals, pouring every ounce of energy into completing my design portfolio. Between late-night drafting sessions, I kept in touch with Carla, tracking each step of the legal process. She updated me like clockwork, court dates, scheduled filings, accepted evidence submitted. The system was slow, but it was finally moving. One afternoon, while reviewing drawings for my architecture capstone, I got a text from Mom that stopped me cold. It was a photo of the front porch where sunlight spilled across freshly painted railings. Beneath it, she'd written, "Freedom looks like this." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "You deserve it." That night, as rain tapped against my apartment window, I lay awake replaying everything. The stolen money, the lies, the years of pretending. Somewhere between those thoughts came the quiet certainty that we were done being afraid of him. 2 days later, Carla called with news. "The court approved the emergency injunction," she said. "He can't access any family assets until the hearing." She paused before adding, "He'll probably call again." "Don't answer." He did call 3 times in a row. When I didn't pick up, he left one final voicemail. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice shaking. "But this family will never be the same." Then he hung up. I saved the message, but didn't listen again. Instead, I walked to the window and watched the city lights blur in the rain. Somewhere in Ohio, Mom was probably locking up the diner after her shift. Carla was organizing files for the next round of hearings, and my father somewhere was facing the walls he built himself. The house I grew up in was no longer a battleground. It was becoming a home again, one room at a time. I didn't know what the courtroom would bring or how long it would take, but I knew the truth was finally stronger than his excuses, and for the first time since this began, that was enough to let me sleep. The next morning, I woke to an email from Carla with the subject line, "Court date confirmed." I opened it slowly, reading the line twice before the words settled in. The hearing was set for early spring. The place where he'd once lectured about responsibility and pride would soon be the same place where he'd have to answer for everything he'd done. The courthouse in downtown Columbus stood heavier than I remembered: sandstone walls, tall windows, and the kind of silence that made every footstep sound deliberate. I walked beside Aunt Carla that morning, our heels echoing down the polished hallway. She carried her briefcase in one hand and a file of evidence in the other. "Remember," she said quietly, "we just tell the truth. Let the documents speak." I nodded, though my stomach churned. When we entered the courtroom, my father was already there, sitting beside his attorney. He wore his best navy suit and the same confident smile he used at neighborhood barbecues. For a moment, he looked up and met my eyes. The expression that flickered across his face wasn't guilt. It was calculation, the kind he used whenever he thought he could charm his way out of something. Mom sat 2 rows behind us, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm but pale. Carla placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder before standing to speak with the clerk. "Just breathe," she whispered. "This is what all that paperwork was for." When the judge entered, gray hair cut, neatly, glasses perched low on her nose, everyone rose. Her nameplate read, "Judge Eleanor Pratt." She scanned the files before her, then looked out across the courtroom. "Harper versus Harper." She said, her voice firm but even. "Custodial account dispute under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act." My father's attorney stood first, a man named Mr. Colton, all polished shoes and practiced charm. "Your Honor," he began, "this is merely a family misunderstanding. My client was managing the funds in good faith during a temporary financial setback." His tone was smooth, the words rehearsed. Carla rose slowly, her calm presence filling the room. With respect, "Your Honor," she said, "we have documented evidence of systematic withdrawals totaling $53,000 over 8 weeks, none authorized by my client, who is the rightful beneficiary. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a breach of fiduciary duty." She laid the printed statements neatly on the table. Judge Pratt adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Harper, is that correct?" she asked. My father stood straightening his tie. "Your Honor, I've always acted in my family's best interest. The money was invested intended for my daughter's future. Market fluctuations, well, they happen." His voice carried confidence, but his hands trembled slightly as he gestured. Carla didn't raise her voice. "We've reviewed his accounts, Your Honor. No investments were made. The withdrawals correspond directly with transactions at Riverbend Casino." The judge glanced down at the pages before her, then back at my father. "Do you deny these transactions?" she asked. My father hesitated, his jaw tightening. I visit the casino sometimes, but those are personal funds." Carla stepped closer. The withdrawals came directly from the UTMA account bearing both their names. "The pattern is clear." The room was so still I could hear the rustle of paper as the clerk flipped a page. The judge sighed quietly. "Mr. Harper, the court expects honesty. You were the custodian of these funds until your daughter's 21st birthday, correct?" He nodded. "And yet you continued to access them years later. That's not an oversight, that's a violation." When the judge's words landed, I felt the air shift. My father's face, always so composed, faltered. "I never meant to hurt her," he said, his voice breaking just enough to sound believable. "I was under pressure, Bill's medical costs. I thought I could win it back." Carla's tone softened slightly, though her words were sharp. "Intent doesn't change the result. The account was emptied, the education it was meant to fund, jeopardized. My client had to delay her final semester to recover." She handed over the printed transcript of my university statement, the unpaid balance marked in red. Judge Pratt leaned back in her chair. "I see no evidence of repayment or legitimate investment. The law is clear here." She closed the folder gently. "This will move to settlement discussions." We were escorted to a smaller room off the main corridor, a neutral space with beige walls and a round table. The mediator, a woman named Mrs. Kendall, smiled politely as we took our seats. My father and his attorney sat opposite us. Carla sat beside me, her files spread like a protective barrier, Mr. Colton began with practiced diplomacy. "We propose an immediate repayment of $15,000 with the remainder over 5 years. Carla didn't hesitate. "Full repayment plus 5% interest, non-negotiable." My father slammed his palm lightly on the table. "That's impossible," he snapped. "I don't have that kind of money lying around." Mrs. Kendall's voice remained calm. "If you can't agree, the court will impose wage garnishment. Up to 25% of your disposable income until the debt is satisfied." The color drained from his face. "You'll ruin me," he said, turning to me for the first time. "Natalie, please. You don't want this." My throat tightened, but the words came out steady. "You already did, Dad." The mediator looked between us, then wrote something in her notes. The meeting ended without another word. Later that afternoon, we attended the preliminary hearing for Mom's divorce case in a different courtroom down the hall. Linda Evans handled the proceedings with quiet precision, her voice unwavering as she presented bank records and credit reports. Mrs. Harper worked 2 jobs believing her income supported her daughter's education, she told the judge. Instead, Mr. Harper diverted funds to gambling and created unauthorized debt in her name. My father tried to interrupt, claiming she'd known everything, but the evidence was too detailed, the timeline too complete. When the judge announced his finding of financial misconduct, Mom's shoulders dropped as if she'd been holding her breath for years. By the time we returned to the civil courtroom, the tone had shifted. Judge Pratt reviewed the final documents, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Harper," she said, "this court finds you in breach of fiduciary duty. You are ordered to repay the full amount of $53,000 plus 5% interest through direct wage assignment." She paused, letting the words settle. Garnishment of 25% of your income will continue until the debt is paid in full. My father's attorney started to protest, but she raised her hand. This is the minimum consequence permitted by law. Then she turned to me. Ms. Harper, the court commends your documentation and persistence. You've handled this with maturity beyond your years. When she dismissed the court, the sound of her gavel seemed to echo longer than it should have. I watched my father stand, his face pale, his composure cracked. He looked smaller somehow, the confidence stripped away. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. Carla exhaled slowly and touched my arm. You did it, she said. I nodded, though my voice felt caught somewhere between relief and grief. We all did. Mom joined us, the afternoon wind catching her hair. It's over, she murmured almost to herself. Finally. I looked back at the building one last time, its heavy doors closing behind us. For years, it had felt like he controlled every story, every version of events. Now the record told the truth in ink that couldn't be erased. As we walked toward the parking lot, Carla's voice broke the quiet. Go home, finish school, she said gently. That's the best way to close this chapter. I nodded again, the late spring air cool against my face. Some victories don't feel like triumph. They feel like quiet endings, necessary, final, and heavy with the cost of what it took to get there. The next morning I woke to sunlight flooding my apartment window. My phone buzzed with a message from Carla Fund's recovery order filed. First payment due next month. I stared at the screen for a long time before setting it down. Outside, Boston was waking buses, rumbling voices, rising, the smell of coffee drifting through the open window. Life kept moving. And though the case was over, something told me the story between us wasn't finished yet. The weeks after the court ruling passed in quiet motion. Boston's spring turned to summer, and each morning I woke to a different kind of silence, the kind that followed resolution rather than fear. The first payment from the garnishment arrived exactly on schedule, just as Carla said it would. It wasn't much compared to what he took, but the principle mattered more than the sum. For the first time in years, the consequences belonged to him, not to us. Mom called the day it cleared. Carla showed me the confirmation letter, she said. They're taking 25% straight from his paycheck. I could hear the relief in her voice, though she tried to keep it even. He's been calling the neighbors again, telling them it's all a misunderstanding. I could almost picture her shrugging. People know better now. She paused, then added, I put a deposit on a small apartment near the diner. Just one bedroom, but the windows face east. I'll get morning sunlight for once. Her voice lifted slightly on the last sentence, the sound of someone learning how to breathe freely. Meanwhile, I was preparing for graduation. My capstone project had passed review. My internship was confirmed, and the school mailed my ceremony tickets, 4 of them embossed in gold foil. I laid them out on the kitchen table that night, the same way I used to line up blueprints before a critique, each one representing something deliberate. I already knew who they were for. Mom and Aunt Carla would fly in from Ohio. Grace and Marcus had been by my side since the beginning of this ordeal. That made 4. When my phone buzzed later that week, my father's name filled the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. So he said, his voice overly casual, when should I book my flight? I'll need to take a few days off work. I sat at my desk, staring at the rows of rolled drawings leaning against the wall. You're not on the guest list, I said finally. There are only 4 tickets. His laugh was short and sharp. That's ridiculous, Natalie. I'm your father. Of course I'll be there. He spoke as if the court orders the hearings and the garnishment didn't exist, as if a title could erase a lifetime of damage. I didn't argue. I simply said I've already made my decision and hung up. For the next few days, the messages multiplied, long texts about family forgiveness and pride, then shorter ones laced with guilt. You wouldn't have a degree without me, one read. Another said, people will talk if I'm not there. I silenced his number and focused on finishing what I'd started. The morning of graduation arrived bright and clear, the kind of May sunlight that makes everything look sharper. Mom and Carla flew in the night before, bringing with them the smell of home lavender lotion, diner coffee, and something faintly sweet from the muffins Carla packed for the flight. Grace and Marcus met us at my apartment, arms full of flowers and pastry boxes. As I zipped my gown, Mom pulled a small velvet box from her purse. Inside lay a silver pendant shaped like an architect's compass. "It was your grandmother's," she said. "She used to draw blueprints for local builders in the 60s, back when women weren't given titles for the work they did." She fastened it around my neck and smiled. "She'd be proud of you." The campus buzzed with families, cameras, and laughter. I found my place in line with the other graduates, the long procession weaving across the green toward the pavilion. From a distance, I spotted my small group, Mom, Carla, Grace, and Marcus, waving from their seats near the aisle. My chest tightened with gratitude. Then just beyond them, a familiar figure caught my eye. My father stood near the entrance holding a massive bouquet of red roses. He wasn't on the list yet. Somehow he'd slipped past the crowd. His posture was stiff, his jaw set in determination. For a moment, I couldn't move. As the procession began, he stepped forward, pushing toward the seating section. I heard his voice carry over the music. "That's my daughter," he shouted. "Natalie Harper. She wouldn't be here without me." The ushers tried to stop him, asking to see his ticket, but he waved them off. "I'm her father," he barked. "I have every right to be here." Heads turned. Whispers spread through the crowd. I felt my stomach twist, but the line kept moving. Aunt Carla was already on her feet, crossing the aisle with calm authority. Even from a distance, her voice carried. "You don't have a ticket, Raymond. You need to leave." He glared at her. "Don't start with your legal nonsense. I deserve to see my daughter graduate." Two security officers approached from the side of the pavilion. Sir One said firmly, "Please step aside. We'll escort you out if necessary." My father's voice rose again, louder, desperate now. "You can't do this to me. I'm her father." I kept my eyes straight ahead, though every nerve in my body felt exposed. The murmurs grew louder as the officers took hold of his arms. "Natalie," he shouted, struggling against them. "Tell them I belong here." His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't look back. The ceremony moved on, the music rising to fill the space he'd disrupted. By the time I reached the stage, the air had settled again, the crowd's attention shifting back to the graduates. When they called my name, I stepped forward, crossed the platform, and accepted the diploma. As the dean shook my hand, I found Mom in the audience. She was smiling through tears, Carla's arm around her shoulder. Grace and Marcus were cheering, their hands cupped around their mouths. The sight steadied me. My father's outburst was already fading into the background noise of the day. Afterward, we gathered on the campus lawn, the sun dipping low as we took photos. Mom kept brushing at her eyes, blaming the wind. "You did it," she said softly. "You finished." I handed her the diploma case and said, "We finished." Carla's laugh was small, but proud. "Your father's face when the judge ruled this feels even better," she said under her breath. Grace handed me a bouquet, Marcus a camera. We posed by the fountain, laughter blending with the sounds of other families celebrating nearby. For a few fleeting moments, everything felt simple again, warm, ordinary, and whole. When we returned to the car, Mom slipped her arm through mine. "He'll keep trying," she said quietly, "but you don't owe him anything." I nodded, glancing up at the evening sky. The light caught the silver pendant at my collarbone, and I thought of my grandmother drawing her blueprints, laying foundation after foundation, each line deliberate and sure. That night, as we sat in a small restaurant downtown, Carla raised her glass. To Natalie, she said, who didn't just earn her degree, she earned her peace. We clinked glasses, and for once the toast didn't feel symbolic. It felt real. Outside, the city lights reflected off the glass windows, blurring in soft gold. Tomorrow, they'd fly home, and I'd start the next chapter of my life. But for now, surrounded by the people who'd stood by me through every storm, I let the quiet moment linger. In the distance, traffic hummed like a steady heartbeat, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the world was finally moving in rhythm with me. A month after graduation, Boston felt new again. I'd accepted an offer from a small architectural firm, downtown Reed and Holloway, and signed a lease on an apartment near the Commons. Every morning I walked to work beneath the canopy of early summer trees, their branches filtering sunlight into a soft gold. The chaos of the past year had settled into something steadier, something that finally felt like my own life. Mom called often, usually on her break between shifts at the diner. "You wouldn't recognize me," she said one morning, laughing. "I actually sleep through the night now." Her new apartment was small but filled with light. She'd hung lace curtains and kept fresh flowers on the kitchen table, something she never did before. Freedom suited her. Aunt Carla still handled the financial side of things. The wage garnishment continued like clockwork, each payment documented and sent without comment. My father hadn't tried to reach me again since the graduation debacle. Carla said his lawyer advised him to stop contacting us altogether. I was grateful for the silence. Life settled into quiet rhythms. My first project at the firm involved redesigning a historical library into a mixed-use community space. I spent long hours drafting and redrafting, learning how to balance beauty with practicality. Late at night, when the office emptied, I'd pause and look out the window at the city lights. They reminded me that every structure, no matter how broken, could be rebuilt if the foundation was strong enough. One Sunday, I met Mom and Carla at a small restaurant near the waterfront. The table was crowded with plates of pasta and glasses of wine laughter, spilling between stories about old neighbors and new beginnings. Mom looked younger somehow, the lines around her mouth softened by peace instead of exhaustion. To Natalie, Carla said, raising her glass, who didn't just fight for her future, she designed it. I smiled, the compliment warming me more than the wine. Mom reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You taught me something, sweetheart," she said. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't peaceful at all, but it's still worth it." We lingered long after dinner, watching the harbor lights ripple against the water. When we finally said goodbye, I walked home slowly, thinking about how far we'd come. A few days later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. My name was written in my father's careful handwriting. Inside was a short letter. He didn't ask for forgiveness or make excuses this time. He just said he was sorry for the things that can't be undone. Enclosed was a single check, 1 month's payment beyond what the court required. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to cash it. In the end, I did. Not as a gesture of reconciliation, but as a record of accountability. It was the first thing he'd ever done that acknowledged his responsibility without demanding something in return. I placed the stub in my file and moved on. Work kept me grounded. My team began to trust my judgment, and for the first time, I was asked to lead a design meeting. When I presented my concept, a garden terrace overlooking the reading hall, my hands barely shook. Afterward, my supervisor clapped me on the shoulder. "You've got a good eye," he said. "You build spaces people can breathe in." That night, I walked through the commons as dusk settled over the city. Families picnicked on the grass, children chased bubbles through the fading light, and a musician played an old love song on the corner. I sat on a bench beneath the elm trees and let myself feel the quiet pride that comes only after surviving something heavy. The scars from what happened didn't disappear, but they became part of the architecture of my life, the unseen framework that made everything else stand steady. Mom was free. Carla had proven that justice could be both fierce and kind, and I had learned the strength that comes from standing up even when your voice shakes. Sometimes I still think about the account that started it all. $53,000 meant to build my future stolen and then repaid piece by piece. But the real debt wasn't financial. It was emotional, the years of trust broken and finally reclaimed. I no longer measure that loss in dollars but in distance. The further I move from it, the lighter I feel. On Sunday mornings, I call Mom while brewing coffee. She tells me about her early walks, how the sunlight pours through her kitchen window just right. Carla stops by her place often, sometimes bringing Lila's kids. They've built their own kind of peace, one that doesn't depend on pretending things were ever perfect. As for me, I'm learning that rebuilding isn't about erasing what fell apart. It's about creating something new on top of it, stronger, simpler, honest. If you've ever had to start over after someone betrayed your trust, I hope my story reminds you that healing isn't a single moment, it's a design process. You sketch, you revise, and one day you look up and realize you're standing inside the life you built yourself. Take care of your foundation, your peace, your boundaries, your truth. The rest will follow. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that justice doesn't always roar. It often arrives quietly in the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt.